But no, I haven't seen it. I was just making a reference to our great president,
I I know.
referencing it.
That's why I asked that follow-up question.
I have not seen the end of it. All right, let's send a message out. Final meeting of the week. Come join us at this website. Alrighty.
Join us at your own peril.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got the USAD just made a decision on hi Hammond on how GPA is going to work. So it's their T3 counts for their S2 for decathlon. So we only two people were affected though. So one went to honors and one went down to scholastic. So
As long as no one went to summer school.
not yet. I got a feeling some of these children might end up having to recover some credit.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah. I messaged a few of them and they're like, yeah, I just don't have any motivation right now. I'm like, I get that, but come on. None of us do.
Until you make it.
Yeah. All right. Got that up. Got this up.
You assigned any badges yet?
No, I have not.
Dude.
Somebody else needs to take charge of that probably.
It's not hard. You just put a check mark by their name.
I know, but I'm already having to transfer their scores from Schoology to the grade sheet, and that takes a lot of pecking around.
Does it really?
Yes. Because it's not an alphabet. It's not in the same order. So I have from the score sheet to Schoology. So I have to like go back and forth a bunch. It's very annoying. It takes me longer than I would like.
Wah, wah.
Oh crap! I just deleted the wrong thing. Hey, there's some
Oh
art.
no.
I was doing some art earlier.
Just see that sweet picture of Abraham Lincoln I put up next to Rosenbaum
I,
yesterday?
I did not.
Ah, you missed it. He looked very Abraham Lincolnish.
He did look Abraham Lincolnish. This is true. I saw that.
Rita was like, "What?" And she was looking at it like, "What?" And you could see she was like requesting to have the screen share back to her.
Hang on 1 second. I need to turn on my AC. Get that get that engine blowing.
So we feel like we're on the plane with our
Also, I
characters.
might just. Oh, it's nice outside. It's my first time outside.
You just turn on your air conditioner and open your window.
Yeah, it's very hot in here. I'm sweating.
Gross.
I'm also a sweaty guy, so it just happens. Oh boy. Yeah, this section really starts off with the real showstopper, with old H. Lowe Crosby and his feelings on fascists.
He's an interesting fellow. Do we only have Heyman in the chat?
Yeah, if it's only Heyman, we might ditch out on this early. No offense, Heyman.
Well, I mean, I have to duck it too, regardless.
Yeah, I meant
Oh,
early
Kathy's here.
as in like right now.
Oh,
Like we might
Kathy's like, wait, no, I'm here.
not. I can see how many people are here. We got 9. They're just not saying anything. They're just silent but deadly.
2 brave people and 6 silent creepers.
That's right. So for those of
I
you
know
who,
that only adds up to 8, by the way. I'm the ninth.
yeah, there you go. So, hi Ashith. For those of you who were not here earlier, that USAD put out the kind of final decision on grades and how grades this semester are going to affect them, and they said basically no grades given during the quarantine period will count, which we were already doing as a district, right? We were already saying your T3 equals your semester 2. For those of you who don't know, the way USAC calculates it is your last 4 semester grades of kind of what they call like academic classes, right? So things like health and speech and some business classes and stuff don't count. They have this weird like 50% of it has to be basically is it a hard class kind of thing. It's weird. So anyways, so because of that I was able to go in and recalculate for most of the people. Some of the people I didn't look at, like Heyman. I didn't look at yours because I think you have all A's, so why bother? Um, but Ashith, it seems like you're officially going to be a Scholastic, as we have talked about for a while, and Anthony is moving up to an honors. I believe is how this is working. I need to check Anthony again because he's right on the line. So I want to check that again. But Ashith, it looks like you are moving down a category, which could be good, could be bad. But it turns out the Scholastics our Scholastics are actually pretty good. So who knows how that's going to go for you? But congratulations for getting worse grades. That dang was it chem? That dang chemistry teacher really getting you.
Chemistry.
I believe it was chemistry. It might have been physics for Asha. I forget which one he was complaining about this year.
The science that ate my lunch in high school was bio, AP bio.
I was okay at AP Bio because I had my whole decathlon team was in there with me, so I basically just fed off of them. I did cheat, but they helped me a lot. But then I quit second. I actually dropped it second semester because I didn't want to do it anymore.
No, chem I took extra. I took chem 2 so I could avoid physics. They're like gross chem.
Yeah. I tried to do physics. I tried to do Chem AP because I really like Chem Pre-AP, but it turns out that my Chem Pre-AP class I took sophomore year, which, by the way, for people who don't realize it, Dulles, having Chem AP as your first Chem class is very not common.
It's daunting.
It's usually Chem Pre-AP, and then you get to take Chem AP as a senior, or maybe a junior if you want. And so I decided to take Chem AP as a senior, but it turned out that during my pre-AP class, I had a substitute teacher the whole year because my teacher had a baby. And so it turns out I knew way less than I thought I did. So I was like, oh.
Whereas when I was in high school, your first year, everyone had to take IPC, like that Intro to Physics and Chemistry.
Really?
Yeah, like it was just mandatory. That's what you took your freshman year, although they had the pre-AP and regular one.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and I realized physics is just science. It's just math.
Yep.
Parading around is science.
Yep.
So I knew I didn't ever want to take that again.
famous words from Miss Matney there. It's just algebra. Yeah, I took bio regular my freshman year, and then that was the last regular class I ever took because it was so terrible. You're going to fail the AP test, LOL. Catherine, when did y'all take Chem Pre-AP? Was that like as 7th graders or something?
In the womb.
Yeah. Oh, last year. Oh, okay. So you guys are taking pre-AP as sophomores. Okay. It really isn't. It really isn't. I took physics pre-AP as a junior, and that class kicked my butt too. So anyway, Ashith, there you go. Hi, Sahi. I forget who Sahi is. I'm sorry. I've got everybody else down. 9th is bio pre-AP. Yeah, 10th is Chem pre-AP. Didn't you do whatever? Gotcha. There's more calculus than Manny wants to let on? Yeah.
If their names aren't in their screen names, I don't know who they are.
No, I agree. At least they said that's the only reason. Oh, that's Sahar. Yes. Okay. Sorry, Sahar. Good morning. Welcome back. I knew it was like very related to her name. So do you go by Sahi? Is that a nickname for Sahar that we can use? Or is it like children only?
Who is Pyromantica?
Pyromantica is Catherine Fung.
Ah.
Okay, that's good to know, Sahi. I will start using that if that's what you like. Okay. Oh, close friends and family. All right.
Well, decathlon should be all close friends and basically your extended family.
Yes, your school family. Although some of you guys are new to the family, so it might not be that yet.
Just wait.
Yeah, hopefully. That's what we plan on doing. That's the goal. All right, it's 1:10. Let's get this going. All right, so Cat's Cradle. This is from yesterday. We're totally not a cult. No, I wouldn't say we're
Totally.
cultish.
No.
In the honors, Anthony, who just moved up to honors, also got a medal in honors and is third overall in honors, by the way. So he moved from I think second or third in Scholastic to third in honors. So,
All right.
Haymans, yes, Haymans getting that perfect. Well done. Catherine Pete, Catherine Fung, aka Pyromantica. Congratulations. Haymans also Hen the Ant. Naveen, who typically isn't on here, although I will say I've seen Naveen on both the Decathlon Discord and on my gaming streams more than I've seen him on here. But clap, clap, clap. Rachel Kirian, also getting herself a nice perfect today. Soloni, who has been doing some Quizlets. If you guys haven't checked out the Quizlets yet, please check those out. Also, do those recall Quizlets, please. They're quick, they're easy, they're like 5 minutes. But Saloni getting another 100 as well, and that is it for the honors. Clap, 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 clap. Scholastics, Abigail with the perfect score. Abigail on a run here. Catherine Leon with the perfect as well. Kathy L03 here in the chat. Well done. Emery again with another perfect. Getting back up on that horse. Only missed one question this whole time so far. Isabella, another perfect for her. Well done. Clapping and clap. Josh, clap, clap, clap. I also want to mention Josh. He kind of got lost. So Emery had that huge perfect run to start. Turned out Josh had only missed one question up to that point, and now Josh and Emery are tied for the highest score in the Scholastics, and I think possibly everybody. So that's awesome. And then in the varsities, we have Leah with a perfect score. Clap, 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 clap. We have Conrad just below her. I believe only got one wrong. Good job, Conrad. Conrad, you're doing great. Super happy to see Conrad doing so well. Super happy to see Rachel doing so well as well. Rachel T. Clap, clap, clap. And those of you who don't know Rachel, you might know her sister, Maka, who's a senior, who's also a great person. Both Rachel and Maka, good kids. Most of the children in Decathlon are pretty good. Most. Also, shout out to Kevin Dong in the varsities. He's been just a bit short of getting medals, but he's been reading every night, and he's been doing really well. So I'm super proud of him. I hope he gets up here soon. Yes, Rachel is Maka's sister. For Thomas's, it is a common last name, so that makes sense. Okay. All right, let's jump into chapter 43, which is the demonstrator. And our good friend, our bicycle factory owner, H. Lowe Crosby, really likes dictatorships. He's a big fan of dictatorships, which, so for those of you who don't know about fascism, right? Fascism also tends to really go hand in hand with the major corporations of that country. It's also you see a lot of the major corporations of, especially right like with Germany with Volkswagen and Mercedes, and who is the guy who designed the uniforms? Do you remember? Is that Miss Johnston? Do you remember who designed the Nazi soldiers' uniforms?
Not off the top of my head, no.
It's a well-known brand, but like these companies really benefit from having a fascist dictatorship, right? Because they're kind of able to control, the people a little more. And
Hugo Boss.
Hugo Boss, there you go. Who I don't think is German. I don't think it's a German company. I could be wrong though. But anyway, so Crosby likes dictatorships. He said. Then it says he isn't a terrible person and he's not a fool. And then he confronts the world with a certain barnyard clownishness. I don't know what that means, frankly, other than he's clowning. Many things he said about undisciplined mankind were not only funny, but true. Which is interesting for Jonah to say, I think. So then he's going on, he's having this conversation with H. Lowe Crosby, and then he says his reason and sense of humor leave him when he is asked the question what people are supposed to do with their time on Earth, because he believes people should build bicycles for him, which is very good. And then He goes on. Jonah says, "Hey, I hope you like San Lorenzo as much as you say you should, and then or as much as you heard about it." And then he says he's going to talk to Papa Manzano, and then Papa Manzano is going to give him his word of honor about anything on the little island. He's going to immediately believe it, which again kind of goes back to his liking of dictatorships, right?
Because if you can trust no one else in the world to, keep their word, it's dictators.
Yeah, exactly, right. Dictators are full of truthiness. Scale is off the charts with them. Um, the thing he likes about the San Lorenzans is that they all speak English and they're all Christians. Which
That's Hazel.
oh, Hazel says that. Sorry, yes, you're right. That's what Hazel Crosby likes, the wife of Angela Crosby. They're English and they're Christians. Which spoiler warning, none of them are Christians. Not a single one.
They may not all speak English.
And they might not all speak English as well, right? If they think they're all Christians, right? And that makes things much easier. And then H.L. Crosby throws out this kind of rhetorical, do you know how they deal with crime down there? And Jonah, of course, doesn't, right? And they do the hook, right? Crime is so unattractive, nobody would think about doing it without getting sick. You could lay a billfold in the middle of the street and pick it up a week later. Which is similar to there was this old adage we've actually talked about in WAP before for the Mongol Empire, where in the Mongol Empire you could carry a gold plate on the top of your head from one end of the empire to the other, and nobody would do anything to you because the Mongol policing of their own states was so harsh, right, that people wouldn't commit crimes, right? So kind of same idea here, right? The idea that if you make crime super unattractive by making the punishments super severe, people are not going to commit crime, right? And so the punishments for stealing is getting the hook.
And murder, and arson, and treason, and rape, and being a perv.
Murder, arson, what else was it?
Treason, rape, or peeping Tom.
Rape or peeping Tom, which is, yes, for those of you who don't know, is kind of looking into somebody's private house and trying to see them do, things.
Being a creepy perv.
Yeah. So to kind of lay out what the hook looked like to me, right? You got your two poles and you got a cross beam, and then you got a big old like fishing hook in the middle, right? And then basically somebody is right here on the hook. Right, that's kind of the idea. That is the hook. Break a law, any law. So break any law, and you get the hook, which is pretty harsh, right? So,
yeah, it's also kind of weird to put the people who might have stolen a pack of gum from the convenience store in the same swoop as murderers,
Well, again, you kind of see that as a trait of dictatorships for certain, right? Like
they lack a certain nuance.
Right, and in their attempt to establish control over their people, they will kind of create a pretty intense police state. We see it with Napoleon in France. You see it with Duterte right now in the Philippines, right, where lots of things are punished pretty heavily. You see it pretty consistently.
Well, and then going into the idea from the 20th century of fascism or communism, I know they're not the same thing. I'm just saying, like, the idea they're both run by dictators, and both have this idea of one size fits all mentality for all aspects of life. So that kind of goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely, right. The Soviet Union with kind of the gulags and the way that they imprisoned pretty much anybody they wanted also definitely points to that as well. The irony here is that in the future, spoiler warning, and later in this book, I believe they say they never use the hook, not once. Nobody has ever died by the hook in San Lorenzo, which is very good, but not for necessarily the reason that I think, not for this reason, right? Not because crime is so unappealing, right? I just don't think they're actually ever going to use it. And so, Jonah. So H.L. Crosby's explaining this all to him, right? How this all works, right? They'll put a point of the hook through one side of the belly and out the other, and there he hangs, one sorry lawbreaker, right? And Jonah's like, oh my god, that's terrible, right? And H.L. Crosby finally recognizes that like this probably isn't couth, right? So he's like, I'm not saying it's good, but it's not bad either, right? I sometimes wonder if something like that wouldn't clear up juvenile delinquency, which is the second time we have seen a reference to juvenile delinquency. And I'm going to ask you all a question now for the first time in a while. When was the other time we have seen the juvenile delinquency referenced? And while you guys answer that, right, he kind of talks about the hook maybe being a little too extreme for democracy. Asa Breed, yes, what's he referencing? With the public hangings? No, not quite. I think Asa Breed might have something to do with it, but it's referencing a different place that we've talked about, or we've been. So he says maybe it's a little too extreme for democracy, right? And instead, maybe they should just have hangings for democracy, right? Maybe it should just be hangings. Yes, he was talking about how good Ilium was. Yeah, they were like, there's no juvenile delinquency here. That's how good Ilium is, which is like, what is it with these people, and I guess these people of commerce and money, and hating juvenile delinquency? I don't get it.
I think that's also from the time period, because when people look back at the 50s and early 60s with, their rose-colored glasses, they're like, this is a great time. It's the sleepy Eisenhower years. We have the expansion of infrastructure. And then it's like when they're hunting around for something bad to talk about, it's never civil rights. They don't, let's not even talk about that.
Right.
It's always juvenile delinquency. You've got your greasers, and you've got your streetcar racers, the drag racers. Really, I hate to say it, but think of Grease, where you've got the guys with the white T-shirts with their cigarettes rolled into the sleeve.
Right.
They're nonconformists, and they're breaking laws like that. That is.
Yeah.
In the 50s, they even had a whole genre of movies about this, kind of played on middle-class parent fears. Probably the most notable being a film called Hot Rods to Hell.
Okay.
Kind of
the
backlash. Yeah, about the kind of backlash of these teenage rebels as they go against the conformity of the 50s.
All right. There you go.
Before we get to hippies.
Right. Also, maybe something that could be a better reference for. I don't know how many of the students have watched Grease. I know, Grease is very popular with my mom, and so I watched it. But I don't know, how much there. But I don't know if you guys had to read The Outsiders, right? But kind of that same kind of kids, right? And so H. L. Crosby says, well, then hopefully juvenile delinquency can go the same way. If we end juvenile delinquency with hangings or hooks, then ignition locks will go away. Which ignition locks were basically locks to prevent people from starting a car, right? And it'll go the way of the rumble seat and the running board. Miss Johnson, do you know what either of these two things are?
Yeah, rumble seats would have been in those old-fashioned cars in the late teens and into the 20s, particularly the 20s, where it would look like it was a trunk of a car, but it would fold open and be kind of this unsteady extra seating in the back.
Okay.
And the old jalopies, as the kids of the 20s like to call them.
Okay.
And running boards, I think, are the ones that are kind of the footboards down on the bottom on the side of the car where you could hang on. You've ever seen the 1930s where the G-men are hanging off the side of the car? They're standing on running boards.
Gotcha. Okay. There you go. So yeah, kind of just saying that saying that ignition locks are due to are important due to juvenile delinquency, and saying we can get rid of them all these other kind of outdated car things, right? Which is interesting that he's putting everything in the context of cars as a bicycle producer, right? And then Hazel says they saw a hook in the basement of the waxworks of London. Basement of the waxworks in London. What a word, waxworks. And then Crosby goes on to say Truman didn't look like Truman, which he's probably quite upset about, because I would assume Truman's a hero to him for dropping the bomb, right?
But also, do you really get the vibe that this guy's a New Dealer Democrat?
H. L. Crosby?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
I don't get that impression.
Wait, sorry. This is my U.S. history knowledge being limited. Did Harry Truman extend parts of the New Deal?
No, but he kind of offered his own fair deal kind of thing.
Oh yeah, right,
And I mean, Truman really wanted to push for civil rights. I mean, he integrated the military, and that was kind of his focus until he kind of got blocked out by Congress because they were like, "No, we don't like you."
right.
So he was much in the same vein as FDR and that kind of liberal Democrat. So I can't imagine
Yeah.
Crosby being a huge fan of him down in the Chamber of Horrors or wherever else.
Okay, that's fair. Um, So yeah, the hook is in the waxworks behind a black velvet curtain that says that children aren't supposed to see it. But of course, as Crosby's pointing out, the kids did go see it because if you're going to put up a sign that says they're not supposed to look, and of course kids are going to look, right? As a sign like it's just catnip to kids, and then they react just like everybody else does. They looked at it, don't say anything, and move on to the next thing, right? Which I like to kind of cross-reference to the idea of juvenile delinquency being this horror of society, right? Because here you're seeing that juveniles act just like adults do, right? At least in the face of this hook, right? Now, I don't necessarily think of that part, but I'm thinking like this idea that, like, they hate juveniles, but then at the same time they're saying these juveniles are just like adults, right? Which, basically means adults can act like children, and vice versa, right?
Yeah, but also it's interesting to note he's talking about juvenile delinquency at home, but they're in the Chamber of Secrets or Chamber of Secrets. It's not Harry Potter. Chamber of Horrors in the waxworks in London. So these would most likely be British children. So this might have something to do with like that stiff upper lip kind of thing.
Yeah, or even like kind of a racist tone to it where you have, non-white kids, juveniles in America, right?
Hmm, could be.
Yeah.
But I do like how the sign is called catnip,
Yeah.
continuing cat references.
Yep. Yep. Anywhere he can squeeze him in. So they show an iron chair next to an electric chair where a man is roasted alive for murdering his son, which they found out he didn't murder his son at all, right, later on. Which I think really nicely rounds out this whole chapter because as we've seen, right, like the kind of as we've been talking about with dictatorships, right, and England's not a dictatorship, right, but the idea of like capital punishment and dictatorships go pretty well in hand, and so like this idea of like the government basically handing down judgment on people and harsh judgment on people could lead to a lot of issues where innocent people are killed by the government for no particular reason, as we see here with this man in the iron chair. I don't know if that's what he's trying to do there. That's just kind of what I was um, pulling out of that one. All right, we got communist sympathizers, Reds in our midst, and he goes back to go sit down with Claire and Horlick Minton, the Dupras, and he had some new information from the Crosbys, right? They were the Crosbys are indignant about his appointment as ambassador, because indignant meaning like they're angry, right? They're very upset about it, like almost more upset than upset about Minton's appointment as ambassador. And the reason they are so indignant is because they believe they were told, they have heard that he was fired by the State Department for being a commie. For being a good old fashioned Stalinite, and that communist dupes. Sorry, not for being a communist, for being soft towards communism, not tough enough, right? Which we will see, kind of a big political point for politicians throughout the Cold War, right? Especially after McCarthy, right? The stronger you are against communism, right? The better you are, you have the better chances you are to win an election, right? Whether you're Democrat or Republican, right? And even that kind of idea has the anti-communist ideology of the United States that was again very fervent. Whether it was justified or not, that's not for me to say. but that has really run into the modern time, right? Like basically, anytime you hear the word socialism, it is immediately tied back to this and kind of goes through all that, right? Whether the socialist policy is something people would actually agree with or not. But anyways, that's a little rant by me.
Well, I mean, I think you still see that kind of deep-seated distrust of communist or pseudo-communist nations. I mean,
Yep.
look at our relationship with Russia and China.
Yep, definitely. Um, Especially at the particular moment that we're in. So yeah, so they kind of go on. He talks about the saloon. He talks about the bar, and then Minton asks who he was talking to in the back. Basically, Minton overheard Crosby say that he's a communist, right? And so Crosby kind of goes on. He said he's not fired for being a communist. He was fired. He tells him directly he was fired for pessimism. All right. He was fired for pessimism, and what really got him fired was his wife, which is what's her name? Edith?
Claire?
Claire. Claire writes an opinion piece in the New York Times. Writes an opinion piece in the New York Times. Not to be confused with the other New York paper we've talked about, which I believe is the Examiner. I forget what the other newspaper was that had the profile of San Lorenzo.
I think that was also the New York Times. It was just a supplement, like a paid magazine within it.
Yeah, you might be right. Claire writes an opinion in the New York Times kind of condemning the way that Americans, it's just the only piece of real, it's a letter I wrote to New York Times from Pakistan, right? So she was in Pakistan, is what it's saying, right? Which earlier they said, right, they had been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it said, what did it say? It said a lot of things. What it mostly said is that Americans can't imagine what it's like to be something else and be proud of it, right? Americans can't imagine being something else and being proud of it. Very much the attacking American exceptionalism here. Which in the kind of in the wake of something like the atomic bomb, right, is, you're seeing that kind of narrative, and in the the Cold War, that narrative kind of popping up amongst, artists and, dare I say, American communists.
But that fits with the Crosbys. They're very much the prototypical ugly American, I guess.
Right. They are very proud to be American, and we've heard them talk about the San Lorenzans as being like dumb, right, and stuff like that. And so and so Americans are forever searching for love in forms it never takes, is something she says, and in places it can never be. Right. Basically, then it goes on to say that like Americans hate being hated, but they're human. And then she also says it might have something to do with the frontier, right? The vanishing frontier, right? Because in that frontier space, right, anything is possible, right? Anything is possible. Anybody can be loved. Anybody can be hated, right? So yeah. That actually is this chapter right here. Why Americans are hated. I thought it was in that previous chapter. So it's published. That letter is published during the worst times of the McCarthy era of McCarthyism. Which, if you don't know what McCarthyism is, I am nigh on 100% certain we will be covering it in this year's social science resource. If we're not, then something has gone horribly wrong with the social science resource.
And we'll do it anyway.
Yeah, but McCarthy was a senator from Ohio?
Somewhere Midwest.
It's either Ohio or Wisconsin, I believe.
Yeah, I was leaning towards Wisconsin, but that might actually be McGovern.
Maybe. So Senator McCarthy kind of he comes up with this like paper that says, I have a list of communist sympathizers in the American government, and using that letter, he starts kind of this committee of, what's it, Un-American Activities, right?
It is Wisconsin.
He's Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Committee Against Un-American Activities or something like that. And
Well, the House Un-American Activities Committee was one thing. McCarthy's was just like a special Senate
okay.
committee.
So yeah, you got the HUAC, HUAC, and then you got McCarthy in the Senate, and then they basically go through all these Congress, or not even congressmen, but like bureaucrats, and I don't think too many get accused of being communists, but then they go into places like Hollywood and start blackmail or blackballing people from being in Hollywood and acting because they were communists or communist sympathizers, right? Because communism was frankly fairly popular with the glitterati, right? With actors and actresses and kind of the artistic elite at that time.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, he dredged up stuff from 20 and 30 years before.
Yes.
I mean, it was pretty much you could get off of, issues with him if you just named names. And so, I mean, people like Lucille Ball were named.
Oh, really? I did
Uh,
not know Lucille Ball was named.
yeah, and because she had, at her grandfather's behest, joined the Communist Party in the 30s,
Uh-huh.
never voted or went to a meeting. But she got called before the committee, and everyone was like, "Okay, back off, Lucy. We love her."
Yeah. Yeah, Lucille Ball was very much like A-list actress, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they even formed the Hollywood people. They formed their own thing. It was like the Committee for the First Amendment or something like that
Mm-hmm.
to kind of fight back.
Yeah, and so when this letter is printed during the height of McCarthyism, right? Basically anything, right? As Miss Johnson just pointed out with Lucille Ball, anything that's un-American is gonna get you in trouble as being a communist, right? And the biggest thing in that letter is that she writes the highest treason, or the highest treason of that letter is that she writes that Americans aren't loved wherever they go, and that foreign policy should recognize hate rather than love, right? They should start recognizing that people hate them rather than that everybody should love them, right? And then Jonah says I guess Americans are hated in a lot of places, and Mrs. Minton corrects him. People are hated in a lot of places, right? People are hated everywhere, right? People have hate for no reason. People have hate for lots of reasons, right? There's hate everywhere, and that Americans are paying the normal penalty for being people, and that they are foolish enough to think that they should somehow be exempted from that penalty, right? Which again is the exceptionalism of America, right? This idea that everybody should love Americans. Um, and then Jonah comes in. It's like, well, at least the story has a happy ending. You're the ambassador to San Lorenzo now, which is a very thick-headed way of looking at this by Jonah, because yes, being an ambassador does sound great, but also being an ambassador to San Lorenzo, this backwater country that nobody's really heard of, right? It's basically an early retirement. Um, so yeah, and they talk about exchange one of those Dupras glances, and then yes, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is ours, right? Which this is just dripping with sarcasm, right? But the Mintons very clearly are good at covering this. I feel like the Mintons are the most together of people in this story, or the most like understanding of what the world is.
The most logical and based in reason group.
Yes, definitely. And I think they're playing that role, right? They're playing that role of like, no, there are smart Americans, right? There are Americans who understand who America is and where America's at. Um,
Well, and I think it's interesting that because they play that role, that they're set up as a Dupras saying nobody else is part of their crew.
right, that's a good point as well. Yeah, like it is maybe a very exclusive thing. Maybe he's even saying that like, actually, this doesn't really exist, but I'm just putting them in this book as this very unique case. Um, maybe.
Loyal to everybody else's insanity, perhaps.
Yeah. Um, and the unfortunate part for the Mintons is that they will some of the people will be alive by the end of this book, and they are not one of them. And maybe some people we've looked at and we're not big fans of at this point. Um, so he goes on to ask about Frank's legal status. He asked the Mintons about Frank's legal status because he is a fugitive in the United States. Again, he's wanted by 3 different departments, which, while I'm writing all this, if somebody could tell me what those 3 departments are that want Frank. So he asks about Frank's legal status, and he says, the Mintons say, well, he's not American anymore, right? He's not a U.S. citizen anymore, because he is, and there are kind of some different things you can do to give up your citizenship, right? You can declare allegiance to a foreign state. You can declare allegiance to a foreign state. You can join the military of a foreign state. You can accept. You can serve in armed forces, or you can work in its government. Which Frank has done all 3 of these. Employed in a government, in another government, right? So Frank has very easily renounced his citizenship here. The Florida Police, the FBI, and the Department of Treasury. Yes. And he says, read your passport. You can't have this international romance with the world that Frank has and still think that Uncle Sam is gonna still pay for you.
I like the way he phrases this specifically. You can't lead the sort of funny paper international romance that Frank has and still have Uncle Sam for a mother chicken.
Yes, it's very, very good wording.
I think it harkens back to that Secret Agent, what was it? Secret Agent X?
Secret Agent X9.
X9, where he was an actual comic book cartoon character. And then Uncle Sam for a mother chicken. You know, usually what's the bird you think of for Uncle Sam or the United States?
An eagle.
Right, and so it's been downgraded to a chicken.
Ah, that's interesting. I just like the phrasing of it. I think it's just great. But yeah, I like.
It's not a coincidence.
No, it's definitely not.
The Uncle Sam United States. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes. And then he asks, is he well liked in San Lorenzo? And he doesn't know. This book says not, right? This book says Frank is not well liked. The book says Frank is not well liked. And then Jonah's like, wait, what book is that? And then it's the only scholarly book ever written on San Lorenzo. And then that's what Claire says. And Minton is like, well, Claire says it's sort of scholarly. And Minton's like, yeah, it's not totally scholarly. It hasn't been published yet. There are only 5 copies of this book available. And he hands it to him and invites him to read it. And he opens the book to the title page and found the name of the book, which is San Lorenzo, the Land, the History, the People, which is very creative. The Land, the History, the People. And it is written by Philip Castle, who is the son of Julian Castle, the man they're going to see, or the man he is going there to interview. He's who owns the hotel. Who owns the hotel that he is going to be staying in. And so the book falls open to a chapter about Bokonon. And there's a quotation from the book there. The words leapt from the page and into my mind, and they were welcomed there. There's a paraphrase of the suggestion by Jesus, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's. Bokonon phrases it differently. He says, pay no attention to Caesar. Caesar doesn't have the slightest idea of what's really going on. So I think we need to take a second to talk about this quote.
I don't know about y'all, but to me it kind of had a Wizard of Oz sort of vibe to it. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, okay. I was tying it back to the discussions of fascists and dictatorships we had talked about, because Caesar is kind of one of the, the first and possibly most well-known dictator in the West, right? And he's not technically the first dictator. For anybody who wants to go on that, I know Rome had this whole they had this whole thing where they would have dictators for 6 months in the case of a military crisis. So he's not the first one, but he took that dictatorship that he had and said, actually, I'm just going to do this forever. So my thought was that like it's trying to harken back to those fascist dictatorships we're talking about, and even with Papa Manzano in particular, the guy we're going to meet soon, and saying like that that dude has no idea what's happening, right? Those rulers, they act like they're this kind of very strong and powerful person. In reality, they have no idea what's going on.
Well, you keep harkening back to fascism, and I don't know that I really get that vibe off of this dictatorship because there's not that, I don't know, inherent nationalistic fervor and that need to expand.
Sure.
It's more like the downtrodden people under more like a Soviet satellite state where they're just kind of going through the motions to not get killed.
Sure. Yeah. I shouldn't say fascism for San Lorenzo per se, but like I mean, I would say like the use of the kind of over the top punishments for crimes. You have some. I don't know if we really have any like government based industries, right? I think I think Papa Manzano sees himself as a dictator, but I agree. I don't think he really is in that sense, right? Yeah, I think he's kind of just scrambling to stay alive as a country.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they all are kind of doing. I do think there's definitely that dictatorship vibe,
Yeah.
and there's obviously the looming threat of violence, even if it never comes through.
Right.
But I don't know. I just
maybe
I don't get the idea that it's an organized
right.
political system.
Right. Maybe it's more akin to the communist dictatorships of the Caribbean and South America, with the name Papa. Right. That's kind of like a very much like a Latin American name for a caudillo or a dictator. There, right? So rather than fascist, maybe communist, right? And in this place,
Yeah.
you could say it's communist because they're too broke to be anything else.
True.
Right.
It's almost like they were set up to be communist, and then the Soviet Union abandoned them, and we're just waiting for their collapse.
Right. Which, yeah, that could very much be possible. They take they take a stop in San Juan, Puerto Rico, on the way over, and he didn't even look up when he heard somebody whisper him that a midget had come aboard. Which again, for those of you, in today's terms, right, using the term midget for somebody of short stature is not necessarily looked well upon. We are just using the language of the book. Papa to refer to the Pope. Okay, yeah, I can see that. I like that. Does Jonah convert to Boko after this visit? He's still Christian. Yeah, I mean, yeah. As somebody's as Catherine's pointing out, Kathy's pointing out. He doesn't even know what Bokononism is. That's the first time he's heard of it. He does see so he doesn't see the small person, which would you're guessing is Newt. But in front of the Crosbys, which may be a row in front of him or so, you see a horse-faced woman with platinum blonde hair.
Is she a natural blonde, or does it come out of a box?
She's new to the passenger list, which means they picked her up in Puerto Rico. And then next to her is a seat that appears to be empty. But we just heard that there's a shorter person on you honestly thought it was Mona? Yeah. No, it's not Mona. Sorry. A seat that might well have sheltered a small person, but he couldn't see. It is San Lorenzo that intrigues him the most, so he stops looking, and then he kind of goes on this thing and say that shorter people are diversions for silly or quiet times. I guess probably alluding to kind of their roles in early 19th, late 18th century, late 19th, early 20th century, kind of like these circuses, right, that had all these kind of different people with different, genetic differences that people would kind of ogle, right? And so, and then he gets really excited about the theory of that Bokanon is writing about in this book, or I don't know. I mean, Philip is writing about that. He's explaining that Bokanon has called dynamic tension, which is the dynamic tension between good and evil, right? The equilibrium between good and evil. Okay, so we have supply and we have demand, and so we have a supply of good and a demand for evil, and or supply of evil and demand of good, and so there's an equilibrium point somewhere right here that you have the equilibrium price and the equilibrium
It looks like a stingray that just had an accident.
point. Sorry, anytime I see the word equilibrium, I immediately shoot to economics. Um, so he laughs a superior laugh, what he imagined to be a superior laugh, which I don't give it that's about. Like he's above it all. Oh, it's because he's in the know. He's in the know because he thinks he knows something that Bokanon doesn't know about the concept of dynamic tension. He's kind of like got this extra knowledge, right? That like, aha, you have no idea. You have no idea how big this is, right? It's the term vulgarized by Charles Atlas, who was a bodybuilder, a mail
Just
order muscle builder.
kind of a sorry, it's kind of a funny name for him because Atlas in mythology is
Man who
which
holds up
guy?
the world.
Right,
Right.
which he would have to have a physical equilibrium to be able to do that.
Right. Um,
I just thought it was fun.
well, I would guess it's probably a changed name if he's trying to sell, mail order, this mail order concept. Which, like, the irony here is that he's not even. Oh, sorry, I skipped a paragraph here.
Fun fact, by the way, Charles Atlas was a real person. He was an Italian American bodybuilder, and his real name was Angelo Siciliano.
There you go. So yeah, it's built without barbells or spring exercisers, which spring exercises were a big thing back in the day. They're dangerous though, so not anymore.
They snap you.
Yeah, but you can simply gain strength by pitting your muscles against one another. And the thing I skipped is that it turns out, as you'll learn later, Bokanon was actually a member of this mail order muscle builder membership, right? Which is why he used this concept or he came up with this idea of the concept of dynamic tension, right? And so Bokanon believes that good versus evil, right? You see, good societies are built only by pitting good against evil and by keeping the tension between the two high at all times. And he reads his first Calypso. Now, it did not say it's the first Calypso, just the first Calypso read by Jonah. And it's about Papa Manzano. Papa Manzano, he's very bad, but without bad Papa, I would be so sad because without Papa's badness, tell me if you would, how could wicked old Bokanon ever look good? Right? So, the dynamic tension, right, we see here in the first Calypso is between the badness of Papa Manzano and the goodness of Bokanon. And I want to spoil something here. Bokanonism is outlawed in San Lorenzo. It is illegal to practice Bokanonism, even though it's the only place that practices the religion. So it's illegal to practice, and if you are caught practicing it, you are executed via the hook. However, the actual thing that happens here is literally every single person on the island is a Bokanon, and they just practice it in secret. And Papa Manzano knows all this, right? He does this on purpose to make people closer to Bokanonism, because he is also a Boko, right? So it's wild stuff with religion here. I'm not quite sure where he's trying to get with it, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, that's all the chapters. We got some interesting stuff going on. And as I'm kind of thinking about it more, Mr. Johnson, I think fascist dictatorship is probably not what he is referring to with most of this. It probably is communist dictatorships. And the pay no attention to Caesar parts, that's not necessarily kind of talking about dictators, right, and stuff like that, but more about just kind of anybody who says that or anybody who gives off the impression that they know more or are in charge really has no idea what's going on, especially because of God and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just another one of those kind of farcical kind of stretches. Like, yeah, it's Boko. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Heyman, that's a great question. Is calling Bokonon good comparative to Papa Manzano? Like, since Manzano's so bad, Bokonon looks better, but he's actually a bad person. That is to be determined. We already know about Bokonon. He is a liar, right? He writes all these lies, which you
And
could
now a thief. He stole someone else's ideas.
right. He stole somebody else's ideas that did dynamic tension, and so far what we know about him doesn't necessarily seem great. And then also you could then make the argument, if we know he's a liar because he told us he's a liar, is Papa Manzano actually a bad person, or is Papa Manzano actually the bad person if this dynamic tension exists, right? And so I feel like what we're gonna see here is that like Bokonon is literally selling a subscription like Charles Atlas is, right? He's selling a subscription to Bokononism by pitting good against bad, by having Papa Manzano, and before him, McCabe, who's the first kind of leader of San Lorenzo, who has the mountain named after him, right? Those two guys are going to make Bokononism illegal, kind of in cahoots with Bokonon, right? Like he's having them do this so that people will subscribe more to Bokononism, right? Which makes his religion, or his mail order religion, more popular, very similar to Charles Atlas with his dynamic tension, right? So yeah, I think whether Bokonon is good is very much up to you, or at least very much up to your perception. But I think Kurt Vonnegut is explicitly trying to make us not like it. I think.
I feel like he's trying to make us not like everyone we've met in this book.
Also true, including Jonah.
Yeah.
Only the Mentons, I think, are the people who seem like good people.
And even they're not portrayed that well.
No, they're portrayed like almost like aloof, not necessarily talking to anybody. So, yeah. All right, that's gonna do it for this week. That's gonna do it for this section. We're getting there. I think we have what 2.5 more weeks left of reading, so we're almost halfway done. So that's cool. Ms. Johnson, you got anything you want to add?
Nope. I mean, I think that's it. I was going to say during when we were talking about the McCarthy stuff with the Hollywood, if you're interested in kind of seeing how that's depicted in film, since we're all just kind of hanging around, there is a movie called The Majestic that has Jim Carrey in it, and he plays a Hollywood film writer who is called before the committee, the WHAC committee. And kind of how that plays out with what the United States looks like after World War II, and the idea of the balance between these communist witch hunts with what we fought for in World War II not quite lining up. It's actually a really good movie.
Huh. I did not know that's what that was about. I just thought it was about a movie theater. That sounds much more interesting.
That's kind of the underlying story,
right.
Once he gets to that small town, but it's really kind of like how the United States is coming back after World War II and then being thrown into this
Cold War.
Era of fear against each other.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty good little movie if you like to be entertained for 2.5 hours or so. 2 hours.
I could do with some of that right about now. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Give you guys a second here to answer. Ms. Johnson, I know you have to leave soon. I don't know.
I do. I'm gonna pop out. But bye guys. Have a nice weekend. I'll talk to y'all on Monday.
Thank you again, Ms. Johnston.
See you, Mr. Hartman.
See you. Alright, any questions left? I got nothing? Alrighty. Well, hey, you guys have a great weekend. Make sure, if you have not caught up, catch up. I'm not doing a WAP thing today. Thank you for reminding me. No WAP hours today. I don't see a reason, frankly. I just want you guys to write. There is no WAP. No WAP. I don't have to have office hours Friday, so I'm going to take advantage of that today because I've had a rough morning, and I would like to just start my weekend soon. Hey, make sure if you guys have contact with anybody on the sheets, on the Google Sheet that's not doing what they need to be doing, kind of give them a little motivation. I think for some people it's much tougher to kind of get going during this time period than others. I've talked to a few people. your wipe stuff was bad. It's not supposed to be good yet. It's fine. We'll get there. We got time. We got like 6 weeks or so, or 5 weeks. So yeah, if you could reach out to any of them, I'd be greatly appreciated. You guys have seriously, like, this has been incredible how you guys have been doing. Like, you guys have been doing so good. I'm very excited for this year. Like, and for anybody who is discouraged that they're not in the top 3 or whatever, I just want you guys to know that number one, this is a very long year, right? We have plenty of time to figure out, kind of really figure this out. Secondly, people who are not in the top right now doesn't mean they're not going to be in the top 3 when it matters the most, right? And then third, not being in the top 3 right now doesn't mean a lot because everybody's doing so well, right? The difference between being in the top 3 and not being in the top 3 at this point is so tiny that it doesn't really matter, right? I know mentally it can feel like it matters, but trust me, at this minute, you guys are all doing phenomenal. So that's it. You guys have a great weekend, and I will talk to y'all Monday.